Hi, Bryan. Thank you so much for doing this. So one of the biggest topics these days is the war on talent. Now, certainly that's something that we've seen across the economy, many different types of businesses, but really acute in the most competitive industries like cybersecurity. So tell us a little bit about how you're managing that.
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, it's been an issue in cybersecurity for a number of years. You know, with a shortage of about 1 million people today in cybersecurity, thinking that number will go somewhere up to around 4 million by 2026. So it's been a problem, I would say, pre-COVID, and it's just been exacerbated by the Great Resignation. So one of the things we're trying to do, and I think has been effective, although in its early days, I like to talk about this notion of soulful work versus soulless work. And one of the things we're seeing in the market is a lot of folks who are thinking more about their purpose and what do they do and what is the mission they're part of. And for us as an industry, not only for Trellix, I think it's a real opportunity because the work we do is very soulful. And the people that are employed at Trellix believe in what we do, believe in the cybersecurity mission, believe in protecting people. And that's one of the things we're trying to draw on is one, we have that culture, we have that mission, and two, how do we maybe attract great technologists that may be in other areas of technology where they may have lost their way with what the mission of their companies.
So how does that play out, for example, in recruiting?
Yeah, so I think for recruiting, you know, we're doing a lot. We just rebranded the company. For those who aren't familiar, where McAfee and FireEye came together to create Trellix. So we've had an opportunity to go out with a new brand strategy. We've been investing a lot of money on social media to just make sure people know who we are. At the same time, we're telling our story about our culture and the work we do. And obviously with all the events that are going on globally, we have a platform also to talk about what we do and how we do it. And that's been very helpful in recruiting.
So certainly, I think for businesses and even people, cybersecurity risks are kind of a low hum of anxiety that happens all the time, but as you mentioned, really thrust into the spotlight in the last couple of weeks with what's going on in the world. Can you help us try to understand what are the real-time risks here?
Yeah, I would say a couple things. I'd say maybe it's a little higher than low hum, but you know, it's a pretty important industry, and I think it's one that does, as you said, create anxiety for many different customers across, you know, public and private organizations. I think I like to talk about it in this sense. You know, cybersecurity is a market that's over $200 billion. It grows at 16%. So it's a robust, fast-growing market. And then I think we have these events. You know, last year, over a little bit over a year ago, many of you are probably familiar with SolarWinds, right? That exposed some new things happening in the market where nation states were attacking private companies. And that kicked off what I like to call a super cycle. We're now in another one of those super cycles, Nicole, which is all about what's happening with the conflict in Russia and the Ukraine and what does that mean for cybersecurity. So at this point, you know, we believe there's obviously a heightened sense of cyber activity, potentially coming out of Russia and coming out of that region. But then there's also bad actors that just take advantage of these moments as well. So it feels like we're in another super cycle.
So how should companies be thinking about safeguarding themselves to this?
Yeah, so one of the things when I became CEO of the company in November, we really looked hard at where was the industry and where does it need to go. I've been in the industry for over 20 years. What we saw was a lot of shields and guards and keep people out, even in the imagery. So we were thinking about how would we rename the company. And it just felt like it was from a past era, and it wasn't current. So what we really started to think about was, what does living security look like? And that's really become how we got to our brand. Trellix is a coin term coming from trellis, which of course is a lattice-like infrastructure for plants and trees. So what I would say to you is that what companies need to do today is be adaptable and be flexible. You know, my colleague, Kevin Mandiant, who is the CEO of Mandiant, we worked obviously very closely divesting the FireEye business, has been saying for 20 years, you better assume you're breached. The question is, do you know it, and how are you going to remediate it? And that's the reality of this new world. You have to build resiliency, adaptability, and capabilities that can help you battle back against the attackers that inevitably are going to get some wins across the industry and probably likely within your company.
So how much of that, just what you're saying about just assume that there's been a breach, how much of that do you think is already going on now related to what's going on with the war in Ukraine that we're just either not aware of or not talking about, or maybe it's coming at 5 p.m. today, or whatever the scenario is?
Yeah, I'll take that in two separate. I think in general in the market, it's always going on, right? There are always people out there launching attacks, and they're getting, it's called dwell time. What dwell time means is somebody's in to your company, and they're in there and they're doing things and you don't know it. The question is, how long is that dwell time? Your goal is to reduce that dwell time and then obviously get to remediation. So that's constantly happening, Nicole, across the industry. That's a cat and mouse game. I think particularly right now, we do see a heightened sense of what's happening in the market and attacks, but it's not as much as folks anticipated. And a lot of people are asking the questions, why not? What we've seen in the Ukraine is Russia has not used a lot of their capabilities directly on the Ukraine yet. And I use the term yet, and there's a lot of theories on why that is. But at this point, we've seen a slight uptick, but I would say it's not as much as many people had originally predicted.
So if we turn for a minute to hybrid work, and so many people working remotely, using video devices, using their phones more, maybe being on networks that aren't necessarily as secure as what you would have in an office, is that just a whole other frontier of potential risks, and how should we be addressing those?
Yeah, it has been. And as I mentioned, the kind of old model was you create a perimeter, you had a corporate network, you kept everybody in, and it was easy. They came to an office place and you controlled everything. You knew who was good, who was bad, and you managed that. That was already collapsing before COVID, because people were starting to do things on phones and on video, and we're already changing the way we worked. It was really accelerated, and I think in some ways, COVID's not a blessing in any way. I don't want to misstate that, but for cybersecurity, accelerated that because everybody woke up and all of a sudden their entire workforce was not in an office. They were at home, they were in different places, and we've seen significant capability upgrade by companies across the world, and I think it's actually accelerated the capabilities we need to be able to handle this hybrid work world going forward. So I think in that way, it has been a positive because people were forced to spend money. They were forced to solve these problems when they weren't together in an office, and we'll reap the fruits of that over the next decade or so.
So what are some of the most common things that people should look out for? Is it somebody's, watching the video conference call and you don't know it? Is it through these email? That seems kind of very early days, but still works. A way to kind of get into somebody's system is to send an email that they click on. Is kind of, like I said, a bit old school, but seems to still do the trick. So, what should we, as employees, as a company leadership, what should we be looking out for?
Yeah, always first line of defense is an educated employee population around these issues, because users do have control and users do have access, and they can oftentimes create the vulnerabilities. So if they can have less vulnerabilities, that obviously helps. You mentioned email. It's still one of the most important threat vectors. Some 90% plus comes through email. Somebody sends you an email and tries to get you to click on it. And I've been getting a lot of them most recently with people saying, we're from Ukraine, we need help, blah, blah, blah. Can you donate technology? And so they're always very timely. Mm-hmm. There's this notion of business compromise email where, Nicole, they would get to know exactly who you are. And it's not like some random email. It feels and looks like maybe even someone you know. So that's always an area to start with. I think the type of networks that you go on as you're traveling around, the level of security that those networks have, whether you're in hotels or or different retail establishments is another way to think about it. And then more and more on your mobile devices with applications. I'm sure if we pulled up everybody's mobile device here, there'd be a lot of applications, and many of those applications you have no idea who wrote them or what level of security they have. So those are just some things at the top level.
And just looking to the future, while this hasn't rolled out, in a practical sense, in any meaningful way, there's so much talk about the metaverse. From that standpoint, have you begun to think about how to keep that future world secure, and what's kind of the early days on that?
Yeah, we definitely have some small teams. It's one of the things that I've been working on, thinking about crypto and thinking about the metaverse and what does that look like. It is early days. It's incredibly complicated. I think one of the key pieces of that will be the world of crypto. And I do think it's something that we'll continue to research and work on, and that will become a reality. I think the way these things work is it'll become a reality quicker than we thought it would.
Right. So when you say the world of crypto, you mean people being able to get into other people's...
Yeah, and when you think even of both cryptocurrency and then obviously encryption, there's two pieces of the crypto puzzle. But cryptocurrency is really taking off and having a big impact, and more companies are starting to accept it. And as it gets more and more mainstream, becomes an issue too in the conflict we're seeing, right? As these sanctions go in place, how are they potentially evaded by cryptocurrency as well?
Okay, we have a little bit more time left if anybody has any questions.
Sure, I'd love to take it.
This is unfair. It's a question from my son.
Okay, it might be a hard one.
It looks pretty hard to me. With the recent Google acquisition of Mandiant, how do you see that investment shifting cloud security and redefining normal?
It's a great question. And obviously, Kevin, who's the CEO of Mandiant, is a good friend of mine. We've worked closely over the last 25 years. So one, I think it's a great move by Google. Mandiant's a phenomenal company. They're the leaders when it comes to threat intelligence, incident response. We obviously, as FireEye, we're part of the company there. I think it's where the market's going. I think Google's taking a leadership position. I think by bringing that knowledge and capability that they're going to get from Mandiant, really that next frontier, as mentioned, in addition to the metaverse, is the cloud. And the Mandiant team will be able to help Google with their cloud platform and making sure it's secure. So I thought it was a smart move by Google, and I'm excited for Kevin and the team at Mandiant because it gives them a great platform to even have more of an impact on the cybersecurity industry. Thank you.
Any other questions? So just based on that, where do you see Trellix in within the cybersecurity market?
Yeah, I think there's three areas that are really, really important. One, I think, is a little bit about what we're talking about here, right? Work shifting, hybrid work, human capital. That never goes away. I think you hear a lot of talk about the metaverse and artificial intelligence and having people that have expertise in this incredible area. There are always bad people on the other side of the keyboard, and we need good people who are smart and who have experience. And so this industry relies on great talent. I think that's number one that we're focused on. But number two is then coupling that up with artificial intelligence and machine learning. That's really where our focus is, to make sure we're automating the ability. I talked about being able to identify those attacks and then remediate. The reality is you want to do that in an automated fashion. And there's a lot of ways that machines and artificial intelligence can help you. So that's a big area of focus for us. And then we're looking at building a platform. We play in the extended detection and response business. We're looking to build that into a platform that our customers can use as living security to help them build the capabilities they need to combat hackers. So that's really how we think about what we do at Trellix.
What about if we just look at some of the biggest outstanding problems that security vendors still need to solve?
Yeah. So, I mean, look, when you think about the direct problems, one of the biggest problems is still ransomware. Ransomware is very real, and most recently it's hitting mid and small businesses in a very impactful way. So whether those are county governments or school systems, whether those are law firms or construction companies. Many of these firms don't think of themselves as technology firms, but they're being targeted and they're losing their assets, whether it's customers, whether it's the ability to run systems. So I think that continues to be squarely one of our biggest problems. I think if you go then to the top of the market, it's really about what we're calling supply chain risk. So what we saw in SolarWinds was nation states embedding into a software package and having broad access to then go after a large variety of companies. So this notion of getting embedded into the software supply chain and taking advantage of that is probably a secondary one that I would think about as well.
All right, just going back to the general topic of the future of work. Where are you kind of on the spectrum of everybody back in the office versus being flexible versus putting a certain percentage on it? How are you as a company rethinking what's optimum for your workforce in terms of productivity?
Sure. So I was just on this morning before coming here. We had an all company, all hands, and we were talking about what we've been doing is in 60-day increments, we've been talking about our offices have been closed. And I had told the team on February 28th, we would make our next pronouncement about what we're doing. What we announced this morning is that I'd like to open all of our offices during the second quarter, obviously making sure we're in alignment with regulations and local laws and everything. But we'd like to get all of our offices open before the end of second quarter. I think, Nicole, at that point, we're going to have a hybrid environment, and depending, we have many different teams. We have customer support teams and sales teams. The nature of their work's very different, but I think in general, and I was pre-COVID, I spent a lot of time at Cisco where we used the technology, video technology. I'm a very big supporter of hybrid work, and I think we've shown people that we can be effective, and they've shown us that they can be effective. So we'll go back to a hybrid. We had the nice advantage of, because we were divesting out of 2 companies, we took almost no real estate footprint. So we've got a really reduced real estate footprint that we're now being very strategic about. Opening an office in San Jose where we can host customers, where we have a center of employees, an office down in Plano, Texas, similar. So we're going to have hubs where people can come, but we're going to stay in that hybrid environment and let people work where they can be most effective and give them that flexibility.
Do you think we're ever going back to a kind of 100% in office? Or is this really a permanent change in the way that people work?
I don't for the business that I'm in, and because of the demands of a 1 million person shortage, if you want talent, you've got to be flexible. I think as you think about, you can't say by industry. Obviously, if you're in investment banking or industries that are very much about mentorship and having people together, you're going to have to make different decisions. For us in cybersecurity, I don't think we're ever going back to where we were before. It'll be some hybrid version of a combination of in the office and then remote, depending on the type of work you do and where you're located.
So one of the challenges that has come up a lot with this hybrid workforce that we've been living in for the past couple of years, and as you point out, maybe permanent in some areas, is the idea about building loyalty to the company, a team spirit among the employees. How do you go about creating that when people are not together, shoulder to shoulder, day in, day out, solving problems, having successes?
It's really hard. I think it's one of the hardest things for businesses today is how do you create those relationships? Because you just can't do them over video. You can't have that same hallway conversation or just the impromptu things that, you're showing up for a meeting, you're getting off. We've tried the, virtual happy hours and all that. It's difficult. I think that's why getting back to some level of a hybrid model will be important, bringing people together. For us, we're just going to have a much less permanent facilities footprint, but we're going to spend more money to bring people together regularly. One of the things I was looking at today is just the travel budget for 2022. Everybody's gotten pretty used to having that number be really small. Now you got to factor into your P&L it's coming back, right? So I saw the number, I'm like, wait a minute, that's a bigger number, right? So that's been an advantage of all this. But I do think you have to bring people together. I think you have to make investments to do that. And it is very, very difficult. The other piece that's difficult, one of the things we're trying and we're going to, is what I call No Meeting Friday. Just getting people out of these meetings, getting them off. Because what we've heard from employees is work-life balance is harder in COVID. They work more, they feel more burned out because they just have to walk 3 steps and there's always something else to do. I mean, I know I do it too. Before I go to bed, I kind of run in and check the laptop and see, you know, what emails came in between 10 and 12, right? And then I get into something. So we got to help folks get some space from it. So one of the things we're working on is, hey, can we have a no meeting internally? Obviously, we support customers on Friday. I don't want anyone to think they're not going to get calls from Trellix, but internally, we're trying to give some space to let people have more time to think and do other things.